Welcome to DRM News Global. We have a really fascinating deep dive today. We're looking at Ben Affleck
Yeah.
and Jennifer Lopez's divorce. And, we have this GQ cover interview with Affleck.
Yeah. Really insightful.
Really interesting. We wanted to get your take on it.
Absolutely. And to add even more to it, we also have Jennifer Lopez's thoughts from an interview she did last year with Interview magazine.
Right. So we've got Affleck right now in the present. We've got Lopez from a few months ago, both of their words. What's our mission today?
I think our mission today at DRM News Global is to go beyond, all the headlines and really just understand both of their perspectives on this breakup, because it was a big deal.
Right, and especially through the lens of these two interviews that you sent us.
Absolutely. It's about getting down to the nitty-gritty. What did they actually say? Not what did you know page 6 say?
Exactly. Okay. So one of the first things that Affleck addresses in this GQ interview you sent us is his decision to participate in the documentary, which is called The Greatest Love Story Never Told, which I have to admit I'm very curious about.
Right.
But, given how personal and private their relationship is, it's a fair question to ask, why would you participate in this?
Exactly.
He says he wanted to be honest and to present their story in a way that's interesting. He saw the project as an interesting examination of their relationship.
Interesting. It seems like he had an agenda.
Yeah.
He wanted to control the narrative. He wanted to make sure that his side was heard. And I wonder what parts of the story he felt were most important to examine publicly.
Right. Because he really does seem to want to be seen as an active participant
Yes.
in how their story is told. And then he goes on to have all this praise for Lopez. He believes she handled celebrity way better, more adeptly, more adroitly than he did.
Which is a huge statement because he's a big celebrity.
It's huge. He's been dealing with this for decades. Both of them have. He describes his own temperament as a little bit more reserved and private than hers. That's a pretty big admission, isn't it?
Yeah, it is a big admission.
Yeah.
And I think it speaks to a fundamental difference between them and how they approach fame. Because that was present from the beginning. They got together way back when. They broke up. They got back together.
Yeah.
So how much does that fundamental difference play a part in the long-term health of the relationship?
Right. And it seems like he's almost hinting at the fact that it did play a part.
Potentially, yeah.
But, he doubles down on the admiration. He emphasizes his love and support for Lopez and his genuine belief in her talent. And he really says, I want people to see her greatness. It feels like he's trying to really convey a sense of respect, even in the context of divorce.
Yeah, I think that's really mature. That's not the narrative we usually get, when couples break up. They're usually at each other's throats.
Yeah.
And it suggests that even though things didn't work out, he still respects her as a person and as an artist.
Right. And he seems to really be emphasizing that. Yes.
And that they're not enemies.
No.
Now, this difference in their attitudes towards public life keeps coming up in the interview. Affleck acknowledges that they didn't always see eye to eye on the public aspects of their relationship. And he uses this really great analogy. He says, you don't marry a ship captain and then say, well, I don't like going out in the water. You've got to own what you knew going into any relationship. So what do you think of that? I think that was a very pointed analogy.
It's like he knew what he was getting into. Yeah. And it was almost like part of the deal. You're going to date J-Lo. You're going to get all this attention.
Right. You are going to be in the public eye.
Yeah. So I think that's something important for all of us to think about. Have we ever been in situations where we had to accept something about our partner that was fundamentally different from our own expectations?
Oh, yeah.
Approach to life.
For sure. But he's quick to clarify that this wasn't a major thing that caused the divorce.
Right. He's saying we shouldn't look at the documentary and assume that it reveals these core issues. That led to their split.
Right. This is just one aspect of their relationship. And there's probably a lot more going on beneath the surface.
Right. It's not just about the public versus private.
No.
And then he comes back again to his respect for Lopez. He says he doesn't mind talking about his personal life a little bit, as long as his feelings and intentions are clear. He emphasizes, again, Lopez is somebody I have a lot of respect for. It almost feels like he's trying to manage the narrative very carefully and to ensure that his perspective is coming across, that he's not being disrespectful in any way.
I think he's very conscious of the fact that whatever he says is going to be scrutinized.
Right.
By
the media.
By the fans.
By everybody.
Yeah. So I think he's trying to be very careful
Hmm.
and respectful.
Yeah. It makes me wonder if he's a little afraid that he's going to be misconstrued,
Oh, absolutely.
misinterpreted.
Yeah.
And he understands why people are interested in, the whole public versus private thing. But again, he comes back to that message, nothing but respect for her.
Yeah.
He seems very keen to avoid any sort of like messy breakup narrative in his public statements.
He's trying to be very Switzerland.
Yeah.
Just very neutral.
Right.
There's no bad blood here. Everything's fine.
Right. We're good.
Yeah.
We're all good here.
Yeah.
And this leads us to how Affleck himself describes the nature of their breakup. He really downplays any sort of drama. He says there's no scandal, no soap opera, no intrigue. The reality, he says, was much more quotidian.
Quotidian.
Quotidian. I had to look it up.
Me too.
It basically means every day.
Yeah, ordinary.
Ordinary, mundane.
Yeah.
Less interesting, he says, than people believe. So that's a pretty stark contrast to the way it's being portrayed in the tabloids.
It is, yeah. And I think he's trying to say that, look, these things happen. Relationships fall apart. And it's not always because of some big dramatic event.
Yeah, and that sometimes things are just boring.
Yeah, just incompatibility or a slow drift.
Yeah,
Right.
right. And then he's asked point blank what happened, and he basically says, there is no this is what happened. It's just a story about people trying to figure out their lives and relationships in ways that we all sort of normally do. It's like he's trying to normalize their experience.
Yeah, he's saying that they're just like us.
Right.
They're not these larger-than-life figures. They have the same problems,
Yeah.
same struggles
Mm-hmm.
as everyone else.
Right. And that's a big part of his narrative
Yeah.
that he seems to be trying to push in this GQ interview. It is also worth remembering, as you pointed out to me, the timeline here. They rekindled their romance in 2021 after that incredibly public engagement back in 2002 that ended in 2003. So that was like 20 years.
Yes.
They did get married in 2022, with those two ceremonies, a quickie one in Vegas, the big one in Georgia.
Yep.
But then Lopez filed for divorce in August of 2024. It was finalized in January of this year. So it was a really short second chapter.
Yeah, it was like a whirlwind.
Right.
They got back together. Everybody was so excited. They get married. And then, boom, it's over. So it makes you wonder, did they rush into it? Was it the pressure of the public eye?
Yeah, what happened? And we don't really get a clear answer.
No.
But now let's bring in Lopez's perspective from that interview magazine piece that you sent me back in October of last year. When asked if she had any regrets about their love story, she very clearly stated not 1 second.
Wow.
That's a pretty powerful statement, don't you think?
Yeah, very powerful, especially considering how it ended. She seems to be saying that even though it was painful,
Yeah.
even though it didn't work out, she learned from it and she grew from it.
Right, and that's kind of like her narrative,
Yeah.
if you can call it that she's trying to push. And she goes on to say that it almost took her out,
Ooh.
really acknowledging the impact. But now on the other side of it, I think to myself, that is exactly what I needed.
Wow. So she's saying that it was a really tough experience,
Yeah,
but ultimately,
it was necessary for her growth as a person. Right, and I think that that's really interesting, that she's focusing much more on her own internal experience and what she got out of it, as opposed to Affleck, who is seemingly much more concerned with how it's being perceived.
yeah, it's two very different ways
Yeah.
of processing the end of a relationship.
Right. So when we put all these pieces together,
Yeah.
what's the takeaway for you?
Well, I think the biggest takeaway is that even celebrities are just people.
Yeah.
They have the same problems, the same struggles, the same heartbreak
Same insecurity.
as everyone else.
Right.
And I think it's important to remember that when we see them in the tabloids or on the big screen,
Right.
they're just human beings trying to figure things out.
Right. And maybe not always succeeding.
Yeah.
Yeah. It is interesting to consider, though, how people with such high public profiles navigate something as private as a relationship. I mean,
Yeah.
I can't even imagine having paparazzi follow me around every time I go out on a date. It's got to be tough, And I think what Affleck said about their different approaches to fame really resonated with me, because that can be a huge source of tension
Oh, for sure.
in a relationship.
Yeah.
If one person loves the spotlight and the other person hates it, that's going to create problems.
Right, for sure. So here's something for all of you to consider. Based on these really public experiences of Affleck and Lopez,
Yeah.
how do you think about the interplay between the external pressures of life and the internal dynamics of your own relationships. I mean,